Attention all planets of the Solar Federation. This is the STARLOG Podcast, your favorite podcast for everything new in science fiction, science fact, and a look back at the years and years and eons of STARLOG archives in the STARLOG Archive. My name is Jordan Hoffman. I am the host of the STARLOG Podcast, and I'm thrilled and honored to be in your eardrums this week. We've got Dave Gonzalez there in Center Neptune. How are you, Dave?
Hello, happy episode 10, Jordan. 10
this
episodes.
Is 10. If you know, the metric system is a big fan to old school nerds that subscribed. Back when STARLOG first came out 50 years ago, the metric system was maybe going to be taken by those of us here in the good old USA. Of course, we said no to that. But if we did say yes, base 10 is where it's at. Are you a fan of base 10, Dana? I like base 10.
I'm a fan of base 10. I'm a fan of how you're like, this podcast is about everything new from 70 years ago. It's actually more like 50 years. It's the 50-year anniversary of STARLOG. But I do appreciate that we have an entire spectrum from past to future to cover on this podcast.
It is. It is a spectrum of looking forward, but also lovingly looking behind. And actually, that's what I first want to talk about. You know, the first thing we'd like to talk about, Dave, of the STARLOG Podcast is what's new in science fiction. And what's new in science fiction this week is a lot of stuff. This is a packed week. And one of the things is actually something that is old that's coming back. Real quick, René Laloux, a French animator who has since passed on. He's currently in that great podcast in the sky. His most famous film was something called Fantastic Planet. It was a classic underground, for lack of a better expression, stoner film, man. Animated film, and he made a couple of other movies. He made 3 feature films altogether. His last one from the early 80s was something called Gandahar, and Gandahar was never really released in the US in its pure form. But now, decades later, there are releases, but they're not the director's cut, and it's a lot of stuff chopped out, and it's not good. But Janus Films, which is the very, they're in league with Criterion and all those sort of erudite brands, Janus Films is putting out a new 4K of Gandahar. And you're like, oh, where can I stream it? The answer is nowhere. It's in theaters. Dig this. So it's in theaters as of this week. It's starting out where you would expect in New York and LA, I think at the Film Forum in New York. But then it's going to a cool theater near you. If you live in Missoula, Montana, it's going to play there. I asked the publicist for the list, and it was Missoula, Montana was literally one of the places. So I recommend, if you liked Fantastic Planet, Gandahar is very much in the same league. So that's something cool that's in theaters. Something else in theaters is this movie called Hotspot. You've heard about this, right? This is the new one from the Polish film director Agnieszka Szmakzinska. And if I'm mispronouncing her name, I apologize. Agnieszka Szmakzinska is the Polish director. She made the movie called The Lure about a decade ago, which is about sexy mermaids and whatnot. And this is, gosh, how do I even describe this movie? Oh, my God. It's like a assassin film, but set... It's like the look of it. Remember, what was that thing called? Spaceship Earth? Not Spaceship Earth. The thing where the Biodome, the real life Biodome, Biosphere 2. Remember Biosphere?
Yeah. I remember the Biosphere 2.
It looks like it was shot in Biosphere 2, which is a very high compliment for me. It's got that weird kind of early 90s Epcot Center look. And it involves a lot of the topics we talk about on the STARLOG podcast, artificial intelligence and mind control and drugs that'll make you hallucinate. And it's also an assassin film. So it's an underground film. And go see Hotspot and maybe play Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon simultaneously in theaters and have a good time with that. That's happening on television. We're in the thick. We talked a lot about the new season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Episode 1, we covered it. Episode 2, we had the director, Axel Carolyn, was on the show. But we kind of have stopped paying attention. But this week was the big week, the controversial week, because it's the episode where the characters all turn into Jim Henson Muppets. And as expected, Everybody's all up in arms on the internet. Some people love it. Some people hate it. I got to say, I can't deny it. I enjoyed the episode. It's controversial. It's kind of dumb to see, Captain Pike as a Henson puppet, but I like if they did a sequel, I'd watch it immediately. I thought it was pretty good.
Everything should have a Muppet version. I'm going to take a very hard line on this. Yeah. I'm sorry if you don't like it. By all means, skip it. But it's one of the beautiful things about episodic television. But like everything should live long enough to have a Muppet version. I'm for sure fine with that.
I think the complaint, and it is a valid complaint, is this current season of Strange New Worlds, which is now at episode 5, pretty much every episode has been a gimmick episode. Mm-hmm. The first episode was kind of a Doctor Who episode. The second episode, which we covered extensively and quite admired, was basically a horror episode and a zombie episode, which is fine. The third episode was just dumb. I don't even want to talk about that one. The fourth one then was like black and white trying to be Casablanca, and that's cool too. I didn't like that one as much. And now this next one is they're all the Henson Muppets. And, Carol Kane's character, her hair is really great in this because she's a Muppet. There is an argument to be made of like, when is the Star Trek Strange New Worlds going to do a Star Trek episode? And I do have a little bit of good news. I don't think
there's a consensus on what a Star Trek episode is right now. I think it is very great to have a Star Trek. I mean, this is what I liked about Lower Decks. It manages to be both like a fun TV series that is of the genre it decides to be, which in this case was an animated comedy, but also inherently Star Trek. I understand that Strange New Worlds is getting a lot of heat as like the active Star Trek show that's on right now. But I don't know, like 2 seasons ago, my thought was these were the fun episodes and this was the series that was allowed to do that.
Yes, I agree with you, but I do recognize that maybe it's getting too much fun. So I have good news for those who feel that way. Mind you, I've pretty much liked every of the 5 episodes of Star Trek Strange New World this season. I've liked everyone except for the third one. The third one was a disaster. Next week, which I have had the good fortune to see in advance, is straight up Star Trek. It's awesome, and we're going to talk about it in detail next week. One other big thing happened. Now, by the time this episode's air, this episode of the STARLOG podcast is out there in people's ears, viewers of HBO Max will have already seen Lanterns episode 2. But episode 1 is out, and you and I have both seen it. And I want to very quickly talk about it because, as you know, Dave, I am a big fan of the Green Lantern.
Yes.
And I was a little nervous to watch Lanterns, the first episode, because it didn't look very cartoony. It looked a little, I don't know how to describe it. It looked a little serious. But I was pretty impressed with this pilot episode, which just, it ends with like, oh, and now it starts. So I get it. It's kind of a prologue episode. But I thought it was pretty cool. Now, I know you watch it, but did you enjoy it, or were you
I'm all in. I do another podcast called The Storm of Spoilers. You could go listen to me and Neil Miller talk about this episode of Lanterns for about an hour.
Longer than the episode itself.
Thereabouts. But yeah, not only do I like it as, I think, a HBO show, and like both the lead actors, Aaron and Kyle, I say as if I know them because they're my friends now, are doing excellent jobs as their performances. But also, I'm a big fan of post Prometheus Damon Lindelof, like this new chapter of making television shows that are really smart with IP that initially looks like it doesn't have to be smart. So I'm hoping that as the series expands, we get more to what you would recognize as Lanterns. I don't think Chip is out of the prospect of being in this series. Because I think it is capable to get that big. What I'm psyched about with Lanterns is in the past week, and hopefully this continues in the second week, people who don't really know what's going on with Green Lanterns have been very, very interested in what's going on with the property.
You can know zip about it and start here. That is a really good point. This is reminding me of what Lindelof did with Watchmen, which is high praise. I mean, we'll see. It's only been 1 episode. I do want to ask, I mean, it's been out now for long enough, so a little bit of spoiler. is Hal Jordan dead, and going forward, we're going to just experience his backup cloud version? But is the actual Hal Jordan dead? That's what it implies at the end of episode 1. What do you think?
I think they would love for you to think that. I think Hal Jordan being dead is something that happens on and off in the Green Lantern timeline and never really sticks. We might have a Spectre future or something. Like, it is the DC universe. And the thing about this episode is it presents it like, oh no, Hal Jordan got shot in the head. But once you get to the full scope of what the DC universe, Lantern universe is, shot in the head is nothing. Like, that guy's coat matched the coat of the Construct, and he doesn't have his ring. Like, I understand where you want me to be after one episode, but no one's ever dead.
How much of this show is connected to like what else is happening in DC, like the David Cornsweet Superman and all that? Because as of one episode, it's unknown. It's like there's no mention of other superheroes yet.
We're going to explain how Guy Gardner has a ring at the same time in this universe that we're told, against normal Green Lantern canons, that at least in this show, in a couple of the time periods, there's one ring, one lantern per sector.
Sector, yes, 2804, yeah.
Guy Gardner eventually is in Superman, so we know that shows up. I'm a big fan of the idea that, like, once Superman shows up, the Guardians are like, oh, maybe you need more people. Because this show does take place from, we're told in a 1996 interview that Jordan got the ring in 86. And then obviously by the time we see his body at the end of episode 1, that's 2026. So we have a huge span. There's something happened in 2006 that we haven't talked about yet. But I appreciate this as a way into the Lantern story, because I think there's a lot to tell, both with Hal Jordan and with Jon Stewart, that you could use this as a jumping off point.
Again, and if you don't know, if you're just like, what the hell did Dave just say? You don't need to know any of that. You can just watch this like a regular TV show so far. You don't need any other knowledge. Although he did say Jon Stewart, and it's not the Daily Show Jon Stewart, but I think most people ought to know that. I have 2 other comments about Lanterns. Number 1, the music choices. At first, I was not into it. I didn't think Boogie Shoes I thought that was not a deep cut enough, especially because it was just used as Knock at the Cabin. It's a great, M. Night Shyamalan's very good movie, Knock at the Cabin. So I'm like, Boogie Shoes, Then Brand New Key by Melanie, also known as the Roller Skates song. I'm like, not that much of a deep cut, but pretty important in the show because they play it a lot. But then No Fun by the Stooges. That's officially a deep cut. So somebody was paying attention. I was excited about that. I didn't like the fact that there's so many swear words. Why are there so many swears in Lanterns, Dave? Didn't you feel there's too many F-bombs? I feel like, maybe families want to watch this show. Why were there so many F-bombs? We don't swear that much on this podcast.
This is what differentiates the MCU from the DC universe. The DC universe is every project gets to be its own genre. So the kids get to see Superman, but then also Lex Luthor shoots a guy in the head. So like that is the level for the DC universe. Nothing gets more silly than that. Supergirl has a lot of human trafficking. Clayface, which we're about to see, straight up horror. But like, if it is in the context of, in this case, an HBO True Detective riff, they're gonna cuss. I think like Tom King does, who's one of the executive producers as well, does this really good and did this with Supergirl, where his Woman of Tomorrow was a take on True Grit, just translated into the comic book world. This is, True Detective translated into the Lanterns world. And in the True Detective world, people are horribly murdered. True Detective is like about satanic sex cults, Jordan. Like,
but
they're already kidding it enough where it's like, at best, maybe there's going to be a yellow fear devil, like the Yellow King in, say, True Detective. But I think this is supposed to be very serious and is going to introduce you to how ridiculous this is as time goes on. Because again, there's going to be a Squirrel Lantern. I feel like it. I feel it in my bones.
I hope so. Chip the Squirrel Lantern or Gnort. Look, in the story, in episode 1, everybody knows Hal Jordan, and he's sort of celebrated. Like, there's a scene where he's just like trying to get a hot dog, and everybody wants his autograph and a selfie. But then later, when he's at the bar, his scheme is to annoy people enough that drunk rednecks will beat him up, so he could then go to the jail. Who would try to beat him up? This to me, I felt like I had a studio note. Didn't that seem kind of dumb to you? Like, he's Green Lantern. Who's going to attack him? And B, why would they think they could beat him up? Because he's got the power ring. He could just make a giant mallet show up and smush him.
I think the time jump between the events that you're stating is going to end up being part of the plot, where
it's going to explain it's going to give me an answer to the question I just had.
We don't see old Hal Jordan do that much, and then at the end interrogation scene of the first episode, it is very pointedly brought up that he does not have his battery, nor does he seem to be in good with the Guardians. So maybe Hal Jordan isn't using his manifestation because he's got like one more charge before the Guardians get really mad at him.
That's a pretty good answer. I like that. You just answered my nitpick. Well, that's great. Well, so it's a busy time in sci-fi, but also a busy time in sci-fact. Dave, I have some exciting news from you, and it's written by a person by the name of Yujia Huang, who writes in Science News Magazine, which, by the way, shout out to them. They're a great bi-weekly print magazine with all kinds of weird shit in it. Here we go. Flying like a bird in virtual reality changes human brain. All right. Just like your mom said, playing too many video games will warp your mind. Stop doing it. You're going to go nuts. Mm-hmm. Yujia Huang writes, in the X-Men, Warren Worthington III sprouts huge wings from his back and shoots into the sky. Scientists have yet to fully turn the comic book gift from fiction to fact, but virtual reality is offering hints of what it's like to learn to fly. After training to use virtual wings, people's brains responded to wing images more similarly to how they respond to images of arms, making wings seem more like body parts, cognitive neuroscientist Yanqiao B and colleagues report. This study was published in a journal called Cell Reports. I love that there's something out there called Cell Reports. And this scientist then goes on to talk about how plastic the brain really is, which I thought was great because last week our guest, Andrea Hairston, she spoke quite a bit about plastic brains in her work. Indeed. And here it comes up again in real life. Quote, if the brain can incorporate something as unhuman as a wing, it may also be able to incorporate many other kinds of limb enhancements. This is dark. This is like Paul Verhoeven, RoboCop-esque dark science. I don't know. The article goes on to say, could people learn to fly with wings in VR? And how would their brains change? To answer those questions, neuroscientist Yiying Kai designed a week-long training program based on the mechanics of bird flight. Wearing VR headsets and motion tracking gear, 25 participants looked into a virtual mirror and saw themselves as bird-like figures with huge rust-colored feathered wings. When they rotated their wrists and flapped their arms, the wings moved too. Well, right there is like, I want to see the Seinfeld episode where Kramer signs up for this.
Sure, yeah.
It's like, I'm immediately thinking about comedy. It's like, Kramer needs a few bucks, so he signs up for this study and he becomes a virtual reality Birdman for the sake of these scientists. But anyway, this article continues and says, basically, participants began to see the wings as part of their own bodies. The firsthand experience did more than reshape the brain. It transformed participants' understanding of flight in ways that abstract knowledge cannot. So just by having the VR wings, they just intuited flight in ways that humans are not supposed to know, which was just freaky stuff, man. I don't know. Yeah. Have you played around with VR? My friend John, if you're listening, his kid had a VR headset and she had a game called The Plank. Have you heard about The Plank?
Yeah.
I played The Plank. Yeah, it's like she was like, I don't know, 10. She's like, Uncle Jordan, play The Plank. I'm like, I'll put The Plank on. And I'd never done a VR headset. It was, one of the ones that you put headphones on, it covers your glasses. And the next thing you get in an elevator and then you go up to the 85th floor of a skyscraper and there's a little piece of wood and you walk out and it really does feel like you're dangling off the side of a building. And it freaked me out. And I tore the thing off my head. I'm like, I got to go to the bathroom for a second. I got to go deep breathing exercises in the bathroom. It was really weird. So you've done The Plank? The Plank frank, is scary stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm more of a fan of using VR theatrically, like for different like filmmaking experiences or theatrical experiences. That's more of my jam. This seems weird because like it's overlaying the wings over your arm. So what your brain seems to be doing, from what I understand, is they started figuring out how to move their arms as if they were flying because they were looking at wings, which is just like so many connections. At first, I thought what you were telling me is sort of like when you get a new tattoo, you know you're really going to be living with it when you start dreaming of yourself having the tattoo and just being like, all right, I've adapted to this is the way yet. But I'm not sure. It doesn't sound like they actually learned how to fly. It sounds like they started moving their arms differently because they're like, oh, these are wings now. So,
another section was like they gave them a bunch of tasks.
Yeah.
And some people were able to do it quite quickly. Some participants learned to fly on the first try, while others needed 3 or 4 sessions, but you could clearly see them improving. So some took to it quick, some fledged quickly, so to speak, but others like, no, let me do it eventually, and eventually learned how to quote unquote fly, I guess, in VR. But, you know, it's just sort of, I'm always thinking about the dark apocalyptic sci-fi elements of this, like the movie Brainstorm. The government gets this technology and does what with it, and starts putting weird body parts on people and deforming them by sending them into VR for too long with peyote, like in the movie Altered States, and what happens. So I don't know. It's just yet another example of maybe leave it alone. Just, maybe the experiment. But who knows? But then let's think positive. Maybe this is for the best. Maybe this is good for people who get artificial limbs and want to learn how to, maybe this will help people adapt more quickly, this technology. Maybe that's the positive spin. Optimize your deflector dish, because we have just entered the STARLOG Archive. I want to go to the January 1981 issue of STARLOG, where kind of deep in the magazine, there was a fairly lengthy article about a movie that was hopeful. It seemed to me like the producers were using the press to try and get the studio to sign off on a movie. It was the guy who had the current rights to adapt Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, as if it was right around the corner. And of course, this was 81. The book was written in the mid 1950s, and there has still yet to ever be a theatrical version of Childhood's End. There was a 2015 sci-fi miniseries, which was a little bit of a disappointment. But anyway, the producer's name was Phil Daguerre. His previous credits was he had a TV show called Black Sheep Squadron, which was like a flying ace show, and he wrote the Doctor Strange television film. Those were his big credits up until this point. But he was the guy that was working on it. And the parts of the story that I thought were interesting, number one is the star of the show. He had commissioned Neil Adams, who was a great DC Comics illustrator, and in fact worked a lot on Green Lantern to bring it back to Green Lantern and Batman and others. And he had commissioned him to do some artwork. And there are some gorgeous images of his sketches for Childhood's End, including when the ships first come over the United Nations and everybody in Manhattan's freaking out, and then images of the overlords, which of course look like typical Hieronymus Bosch devils, and the main overlord, a fellow by the name of Karelin. If you've never read Childhood's End, it's as good as they say. It's one of the best classic, old school sci-fi books. It might even be Arthur C. Clarke's best book. It's that, or 2001. Oh, Rendezvous with Rama is pretty damn good too. But it's one that I really like. So just this article is just, it's just basically him nudging Universal. He's like, they got to do it. They got to give me the budget. And there's a couple parts in here that I thought were kind of interesting. He talks about how difficult it is to talk with Arthur C. Clarke, because at the time Arthur C. Clarke was living in Sri Lanka. Now, he'd moved there for several reasons. One is he liked to scuba dive. Number two is it was the best way to see the stars through telescopes because it was on the equator, and also because he was gay and he felt that there was less scrutiny of his lifestyle there than in Britain. So when he's but what the producer talks about was how difficult it is to to have story notes with, quote, hard to get too many specifics talking to a man I've never met at 1:30 in the morning my time, as there is an 11 and a half hour time difference between California and Sri Lanka. And this just was something that brought to my mind, because there was a book that was actually published after the movie 2010 came out, 2010, the year we made contact, which is the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's all about how the director, Peter Hyams, would communicate with Clarke and work on the screenplay. And it's like they just got email. It's like 1984 or whatever, and it's like they're talking about plugging their phones in, and there's like a whole chapter explaining how email works and how they would still have to wake up in the middle of the night and put their phone on a modem, like in the movie War Games, where they have to actually pick up the phone and stick it in a thing. So I love that little book about the making of 2010, and I was just like, yeah. So just a few years earlier, there was not even that. They had to do these phone calls in the middle of the night. But anyhow, the producer then talks about how Childhood's End was sort of a maybe not for the studio. They were thinking it would be a 3-night telefilm or a big production first on, and then ABC and NBC, and it just basically says they're waiting to make sure that Star Trek the Motion Picture and The Black Hole would both be relatively successful before proceeding into production. And I read that one, well, that kind of explains it, if they were putting all their money on those two, because those
being the one.
Yeah,
it sounds like they should have been pitching themselves parallel to V. Wouldn't V have been in development as a TV series?
A few years later, okay. we got a few years till V. So unfortunately, this fell in the cracks. Although Star Trek: The Motion Picture did make money, and that is something that The Black Hole did not make money. Star Trek: The Motion Picture did make money, but not enough for what they were expecting. It made enough for them to do Star Trek 2 at a very streamlined budget with new producers. So I don't know. That little tidbit jumped out at me and made me think, well, this is kind of amusing. So the project never went anywhere. But if you should find at an old antique store near you, go and get this issue of the magazine, because you will see great images from Neil Adams of the movie that never existed. Really, really cool. When I saw them, when I was leafing through, I was like, my God, those are gorgeous shots. And, like I said, there was a 2015 sci-fi TV version, which is fine. This producer, Phil Daguerre, he later went on to create the show. When he gave up on this, he's like, I got to do something that's a surefire hit. He made the show Simon and Simon, which is one of those shows I've heard, like Cagney and Lacey. I think it was just sort of like a cop show that was on forever. And that was a big hit. And then he did something called Whiz Kids, Whiz Kids was a flop, but Whiz Kids was like early computer hackers. It was like kind of based on War Games at a level, teenage computer hackers. Then he did a lot of writing for some cool 80s shows like Max Headroom, cool sci-fi show, and also the rebooted Twilight Zone. So the guy had a really good career once he left this behind and decided to let somebody else try to make Childhood's End. I mean, the thing about that book is it does jump around. With a lot of Arthur C. Clarke's books, you get to know some characters and then it jumps 85 years. It's like, well, where's the guy I've been spending time with? Well, he's dead, but we got some new main character now. That happens a lot. I mean, Clarke, maybe one could argue that his short stories are where he really excelled. Sometimes 13 pages is really where he was the best. Then when this fella, Phil Daguerre, died, he died rather young, actually. He died at the age of 60. In the Variety obit, it mentioned that he was among the first Hollywood filmmakers to embrace new computer technology, creating a model for tracking daily progress on production for Simon and Simon, a concept that was later adopted throughout the industry. They're a little vague about what this new computer technology is, but I like that the guy was clearly a STARLOG guy. So hats off to him. He tried to make this movie happen. It didn't work, but at least we still have these pictures that we could look at. Hey, Dave, I think our guest has just appeared, materializing from my mind, an apparition, a vision, a projection. I'm not sure. It's filmmaker Rodney Ascher. Hello, and welcome to the STARLOG Podcast.
Hey, Jordan. Thanks. I'm really excited to do this one.
That's awesome. That's terrific. Well, we're going to let people who maybe are not familiar with the name Rodney Ascher explain who this gentleman is and why he's here. But before we get to that, STARLOG casts a wide tent. We're science fiction, we're hard science, we're the unknown, the unexplainable. And that kind of is where you fit in, I would imagine. A little bit more of the where science and the unexplainable connect. Is that kind of where is that your sweet spot, would you say?
I think the way I like to look at it is sort of the porous line between fact and fiction and the sort of complicated relationship that they have sometimes.
Roddy, the first film of yours that I saw, and it was not the very first thing you did, but it was a short film which is readily available on the internet that anybody can watch, called The S from Hell. And when I saw The S from Hell, I did not realize it diagnosed something in me that I didn't even know that I suffered from, which was irrational fears of a mundane thing that if you told anybody you had this fear, they'd look at you like you were crazy. But I discovered that through this film that many other people had the same fear. Now, I did not have the same fear as the people in this film, but I had other what you would call like lateral fear, like something similar. So maybe you could tell people very quickly what The S from Hell is all about.
Sure. Well, it's the story of, a half dozen people who, as kids, had a phobia of the logo for Screen Gems. And, we take it, as seriously as we can. And, by the end of the short, and I think it runs, about 10 minutes, I'm hoping to install, a similar phobia in the audience. I mean, I think all these, yes, I get it's kind of, yes, I get the joke, but we also, try to commit to it and take it seriously in a way. I think all these projects, are about trying to let the audience see the world through the eyes of the people that I'm talking to, right? So I think a more, straightforward documentary, is kind of an exercise in journalism and trying to explain a historical event. But, I think maybe this, the more hyper-specific niche that I've been exploring is letting people see the world through the eyes of somebody who's got like a hyper-specific, point of view, whether they're obsessed with The Shining or they're suffering from sleep paralysis and they're seeing these shadow figures that they're not sure whether or not, are supernatural or like in Glitch in the Matrix, whether they think they're living in, a digital simulation.
Yeah. Well, that's something that, I was reflecting on your work today, is that you are maybe one of the most sympathetic or empathetic filmmakers that I can think of, because you cover topics that when you describe the movies like Room 237 or Glitch in the Matrix, it's like, oh, you got to see this movie. Room 237, it's about, and forgive me, but this is how people talk, it's about all these nutcases who think The Shining they have all these crazy interpretations of The Shining. That is the log line. It's about a bunch of nutcases, but you never say that. Your film presents it just straightforward and in a caring way that allows these people to plead their case and never talks down to them. And it's up to the audience to figure out, where if this was somebody talking to you at a bar, when would you walk away from them and feel uncomfortable, or how much longer you'd like to hear what they have to say. And that is a very hard needle to thread, and you've done it throughout your work, I think.
Well, thanks. And I mean, I think one thing I appreciated about, seeing people react to Room 237 is, many of the responses to it have been, this person makes a lot of sense, but this other person, is off their rocker. And I have seen each of the people featured in the movie described as one or the other, or in some cases as both, because after, you never see their faces, you hear voices and they're identified once. And, some people lose track of who's who. And I, recently was talking to someone who thought the same person was two different people, and at once completely reliable and, completely out to lunch, which, goes a great way into talking about, the subjectivity of all this.
Sure. I mean, that's a really great aspect of never using, the faces or even identifying the voices too much, it becomes a bit of a wall, just a blur of just like ideas. And the ones that resonate with you are less crazy than the ones that don't resonate. So, yeah. So Room 237 was the first feature, but just to get back to the S from Hell, if anybody is saying, what does he mean by the Screen Gems logo? Screen Gems, of course, is a film production company. It's still around. Then television, and in the Gen X days of rerun television, you would watch like Bewitched or something, or I don't know, the Gilligan's Island or something. And at the end of the episode, you would see a logo for Screen Gems, and it would just be this like kind of pukey mustard green with this deep red and these floating parallelograms that swirl around, and then an early synthesizer sound that for some reason just struck people as demonic or just like terrifying for reasons that could never be explained. I mean, maybe there's a shrink out there that could explain what it is about those tones that resonate with some people, but I don't know. It's just something that hit people.
Well, I think it felt, in a lot of ways, it was so simplified and geometric, especially I think that version of the logo, came out during the 60s, that there was a severity in modern design that was abstract and robotic in a way that a lot of other things on TV weren't. I mean, I remember when I first came across these accounts, people posting, about their fear of the logo. And I had this hyper vivid flashback to being like 3 years old, sitting on, the carpet in my grandparents' house, watching TV at 5 a.m, waiting for everybody else to get up. And those sorts of interstitials felt to me like we were seeing this, because it would happen at the end of the show, right? After the credits and before the next commercial, it almost felt like I was seeing the machine language between program 1 and program 2, that there was a moment when nothing was being broadcast. So we were getting more into the core of what's floating around in the electronic ether.
I love that. Yeah.
And, I certainly didn't have language like this, when it was at that age. So it was always a very private kind of a fascination, kind of an obsession. It wasn't as intense, emotional, and terrifying as it was for the folks that I talked to, but it was strong enough, that when I came across their recollections, it sparked a memory, and neurons started flashing, and I had a little moment of time travel.
So I want to jump ahead to Room 337. How I first heard about it was this. It was in Sundance X amount of years ago, and somebody said to me, "Oh, did you see Room 237 yet?" And I said, no, I haven't seen it. I don't know what that is. And he's like, well, it's screening again today at 4 at the blah, blah, blah theater. You have to see it at this festival because it's never, ever going to get released. There's no possible way it could get released. It's the most illegal movie ever made. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, it's just all, you'll see. It's just all The Shining. It's just cut. I mean, the visual is just The Shining cut and rearranged, and there's no way they could do that. So I went and saw it, and I immediately declared it the greatest thing in the history of time, as it is. But that is a real concern. When you were presenting this thing, putting it together, was there ever how the hell is this allowed? Because you didn't own the footage. You owned the audio, and you owned the rearrangements and the premise, but you did not own what was on the screen.
Well, I mean, there were two things. On the one hand, there were precedents for, remix heavy projects like this. I'm a gigantic fan of collage filmmakers like Bruce Conner or Craig Baldwin. And there's this, iteration of copyright law, fair use, which allows you to, reuse reuse material, when you're commenting on it, satirizing it, transforming it. So that was something I was familiar with. But I mean, I think the biggest aspect of this was, me and my buddy Tim were doing this in our spare time on a home computer because we thought it was a cool idea. And I mean, the reason we didn't think it was going to get released is because it was a homemade video essay about people obsessed with The Shining. It didn't feel like we were making a movie destined to play in theaters for audiences. Like maybe like Craig Baldwin has this amazing storefront indie theater in San Francisco, The Other Cinema, in his program, The Other Cinema at Artist Television Access. So, I mean, in my mind, it'll play at a handful of indie storefront theaters on folding metal chairs for 20 people was really the height of our ambition, and getting into Sundance was a surprise, and getting an audience was a surprise, and there being actually a demand to release it commercially was a surprise. But, as that stuff started to happen, and, as we started talking to the festival, we said, well, is there a way we can really do this? We can really do this. And, we met with a clearance team and copyright lawyers, and there was a way.
Yeah. So let's jump ahead. Your most recent film, which is going to be available for non-festival attendees to see very soon, is called Ghost Boy. It debuted at South by Southwest, I believe, right? Is that where it debuted?
Yeah, we played South by last year.
Okay, and
we won the audience award in our category, which was
remarkable reviews. Everybody
exciting.
who saw it loved it. I didn't see it yet, and it sounds really. It's a striking story, and it sort of plays on. I mean, all of your films are about real psychological and physiological issues. The nightmare is about people who have sleep paralysis, and that's a real thing, whether or not they actually venture into a Oz or Narnia-like place and share experiences with dark figures, we don't know. The Glitch in the Matrix are about people who believe that we all live in a simulation, in a simulation, and whether or not that's true or not, I can't say, but I can say that these people really do believe it. So it's an actual experience. But this one, Ghost Boy, is a little different because it is a medical thing. Somebody had a disease called, is it just called locked-in syndrome? Is that the actual
locked-in syndrome? I think is not necessarily a medical term, but I mean it talks about somebody who is conscious but is unable to communicate with anyone, and in fact is not necessarily recognized as conscious by the outside world. Right, so. This is the story of Martin Pistorius, who was living in South Africa. And when he was 12 or 13, he had a really bad fever and he fell into a coma. And 3 years later, he woke up. But then it was another 9 or 10 years before anybody realized that he woke up.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Because he was he wasn't exactly in a coma at that point, but he only had the loosest control of his body and he couldn't talk. And, they didn't know that anybody was home. And he wrote this really profound memoir of those years and how he found his way back to the world of other people, and built a life on the other side. And he's still in a wheel. He's much better. Yeah. He's, but he's still, he's in a wheelchair and he can't talk. He communicates, text to speech on a keyboard. But, he's, in a way he's got, sort of the voice of a poet. Like his language is really, is really beautiful, and the book is really amazing. And then what's kind of interesting about it is sort of an amorphous way that it kind of moves through time. In my big idea, when this story, when I had the opportunity to work on this story, was there wasn't a ton of archive to work from, a handful of pictures from those years, and it became clear, even I think in his book that, he doesn't like, to sit there while other people talk about him, right? Communication, he sees communication as what makes people special, what is unique to humankind. And so rather
it's the
than
thing he can't do.
Well, he can't speak out loud, but he can communicate. He's connected to the whole world now through the internet and the power of type. So my notion was the films that I looked at that I found most inspirational were these Spalding Gray performance movies, Swimming to Cambodia or Grey's Anatomy, right? And so this movie is largely Martin telling his own story in his own words, and it's his voice synthesized program that's doing the narration as he's reading, excerpts from his book or answering questions, and it moves between, him in a studio talking, and what's kind of striking, I saw that there was a TED Talk that he did, and what I found so amazing about it, right, is he pressed play and then looked out into the audience, is that, he's very expressive. So you can see in his eyes when he's telling his story, he's both communicating to an audience, but he's also sort of reflecting back himself. So he kind of moves between reliving these stories and communicating them out to an audience. So, if I was going to do the most simple version, most extreme simple version of this, it would have just been a 90-minute close-up of his face, looking forward while hearing back his story. And there is a fair amount of that, right? But we also, we shot in a studio for about a week, did these really simple, like kind of black box reenactments in front of a big video screen with slides and we with slides and animations and things behind the actors. So it's, it's not as bombastic, psychedelic and transportive as Moon Age Daydream, but it is, trying to be, a voyage through his memories and through his head.
When you learned about his story, when did it click for you? Like, oh, I need to make this film. Like, when did you realize, like, oh, this is the obvious next choice for me?
Well, it was interesting because a few years back, I heard a version of his story on Invisibilia, the podcast, and listening to it, it's like, wow, this is the kind of story that I would like to do. Right, large, like this is like a lot of the other films I made. Right, this is somebody who teaches themselves, like, one aspect of his story is, they leave him in front of the TV a lot, and he learns about the world from what he sees on TV and from what he overhears people talking about around him. This is a person who is using these external clues to kind of solve the mystery of who he is and how he fits into the world. The way 237 folks pour over The Shining, or the Nightmare folks look at Nightmare on Elm Street, or whatever vague references they could find to their condition. So it very much felt like the kind of story I like to tell, but at that point I'm like, well, I guess they did it. It's done. This 20-minute radio show kind of might be the best format for this. And then it was like 2 years later, a little fuzzy on the math, when the producers reached out to me that they were working with Martin and his book, and they were looking for a director to tell the story, right? So
it was a two-way street on that one. They found you. Oh, that's terrific.
They found me, but I was like, oh, I know this story.
Yeah.
and I reflected on it for a couple days before finding, what my version of it was going to be.
Do you keep in touch with your subjects at all? Like, specifically the people from Glitch in the Matrix, because some of them,
I do.
Some of them seemed like they were in bad shape, but some of them seemed like they were kind of coming to a point of clarity. And I'm wondering if do you check in on them, or once the movie's done, you kind of move on?
I stay in touch with them. Not everyone and not all the time. I mean, I did recently talk to, Josh Cook from Glitch in the Matrix, who's still in prison in Virginia. He can't take back what he did, but he's, trying to move forward, to be as positive a person as he can.
The most terrifying thing about Glitch in the Matrix to me is, it's about people with varying degrees of to what extent they truly believe that all we perceive is some sort of simulation, brain in a vat, we live in a computer, someone else is pulling the strings. And one of the people who, you don't interview him, but you have a lot of footage of him saying it, is Elon Musk, who seems to really say that he believes this, which is all fine and good, except for the fact that Elon Musk is the wealthiest person on the planet and he controls Starlink, which could, at the snap of if he decided he wanted to do something radical, he wanted to stomp on all the NPCs out there, there's nobody better positioned to do that anywhere on the globe than Elon Musk. And if he is close to what most people would call a psychotic break. I don't want to judge everybody who thinks we live in a simulation. Who am I to say we don't live in a simulation? But, it's a little bit frightening to think that Musk could be someone who could have a radical change of perception at any given moment. Yeah,
well, it's interesting, that Elon Musk that we featured in the movie, and that came out in 2020 now, was not, was not the Elon Musk that we know today, right? Was not nearly as political, or at least not publicly.
Yeah.
And so, the last time I watched it, like you, I said, wow, there's a lot of Elon in this movie.
Yeah.
And he means something different than he used to.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've heard him talk about this stuff. But though, he sure, isn't shy about talking in public these days.
And do you consider yourself like a sci-fi guy? I mean, the movies are they're not sci-fi, but they all seem to appeal to, certainly to me, who is a sci-fi guy. I mean, I kind of put you in that bucket. It's a very big bucket, but I mean, Is that where you think of yourself?
Well, I think the same way that I don't think of myself as a pure documentary filmmaker, I'm also not a pure sci-fi guy or pure horror guy. I'm kind of, have one foot. I guess I have, many feet because I've got more than 1 foot. I've got more than 2 feet in different in different genres. Science fiction, is something that I love. And to get to STARLOG, I never had a subscription. The STARLOG stuff that I loved most when I was a kid were the square-bound guides.
Oh,
to
God.
Aliens or robots or even special effects. I remember at one point as a teenager, I was hoping to be a special effects artist, and then I was hoping to be a comic book artist. I was a storyboard artist for a while, for a couple of years out of college. But if memory serves, that STARLOG Guide to Robots.
Do you mean this? Are you talking about this right here?
I am. Hey, can you confirm for me whether that is where I first saw the picture of Muffet the Daggett, aka the robot dog from Battlestar Galactica, but that creation was actually a costume worn by a chimp? Is there a photo of that robot with a head off in the chimp in it?
Oh, here's Daggett. Yeah. But I don't see a chimp in there.
Well, there is a chimp. Trust me.
There is a chimp in there.
Well, the STARLOG.
Oh, I think I just saw. I saw Twiki from Buck Rogers.
Please, this is the Twikie's all over this thing in the centerfold.
Bit. Let's go, Buck.
These STARLOG photo guidebooks, there were many of them that were published back in the day. I happen to literally just have on my desk the robots one, which is probably the best one. The villains one, which is pretty cool because it's got a Klingon.
That one I never had.
It's got Darth Vader.
Yeah,
and it's got Ming the Merciless.
Yeah.
And then it's got spaceships right there is a good one too.
That was my primary window into STARLOG.
What was your thing as a kid? Like, what was the thing that you sank your teeth into the most? That was the fandom, if there was one, that you were most obsessed with. That people would say, "Oh, that's his thing,"
I was super into comics. I'm super into Godzilla movies. I did get into Kubrick when I was, maybe 15. or so, 14 or so. I saw Dark Star, John Carpenter's Dark Star, theatrically when I was like 12.
Wow.
Which is still probably my favorite Carpenter, even if lately I think maybe the Dan O'Bannon influence is easier to sense.
Sure.
In that one.
Yeah.
I remember when I was growing up in Boston as a kid, I remember I would live for the Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon Creature double feature on Channel 56, which would have, things like The Brain That Wouldn't Die and, certainly Godzilla movies, Gamera movies, When Worlds Collide, the original The Thing.
Yeah.
And even just the title sequence for that, which was like this amazing solarized, like 2-color cathode outer misregistered bleeding color kind of overlap montage of like 50s monster movies.
Now, somehow I don't know specifically what you mean because I did not grow up in the Boston area, but I know exactly what you mean. I mean, those early intros.
Well, and that was, I looked at that stuff like homework, right? And I would circle in the TV guide, that would come in the newspaper. Oh man, Bride of Frankenstein is going to be on Friday night at 2 a.m. I better set my alarm because I may never have a chance to see it again.
Yeah, that was the thing. We lived and died at the. If your parents had said no, we're going to Grandma's house that weekend, it's like, oh my God, no, TV Guide says I can't. It's a big fight.
When will I see When Worlds Collide? Right. Never. I'll never have a chance to see that again. And in those STARLOG guides, would have just a single photograph of, of the movie, and that'd be all you would know for years,
right?
Before you were able to see these things.
Yeah. The pre-internet world is a whole other galaxy, really.
Somebody else who changed over the course of the years, but Michael Medved, the Medved brothers, Golden Turkey Awards was education into a lineup of films that I would wait years to have to see.
I'm glad you mentioned Gamera, by the way. I feel like Gamera gets overlooked because Gamera is not a Toho property. I don't think. We can fact check that later. So I feel like
he's another team.
Right. So it's like I feel like he's like the GoBots instead of the Transformers, basically. But I feel like Gamera needs more love. And I think if the STARLOG podcast can do anything, starting with this interview here with you, Rodney Ascher, we're going to try and bring some Gamera love back into pop culture.
I wish you would. There's an amazing Gamera trilogy, like in the late 90s.
Yeah.
Gamera 3, The Revenge of Iris, is an unbelievable movie.
Oh, my God. Well,
it's a top 10 Keiju movie, with Colossal and the host.
Can you tell me when you realized you were living in the future? Was there a moment? Was there like oh my God, I live in the future now?
Well, it might have been right when, the clock changed to 2000. But even before then, like we started hitting these dates that were clocked as sci-fi dates, right? Like 1999. Well, okay, we are in space 1999. Right. Base Alpha is, hasn't been built, let alone sent careening out of our orbit yet. Isn't Escape from New York in 97?
I think it is. I think it is 97. Yeah.
Like we started clocking those, they were,
we lived through original
milestones. Yeah, as the future was getting closer and closer and closer, that the universe was diverging, like that. All right, well, we're not going to be in the Escape from New York universe.
Right. We're
not going to be in the Space 1999 universe or 2001: A Space Odyssey. Although, aspects of all those movies, do come true. Have been coming true in surprising ways. When did you realize we're living in the future?
Well, I gave my answer in a previous episode at length. But for me, and it sounds very mundane, but it really shook me to the core. It was the first time I used Shazam at a bar because I pride myself in being the guy who knows every song. And sometimes you really don't know every song. And I'm like, oh, I know this, but what is it? And I couldn't name it because as you get older, you start to forget things. But I had heard about this thing called Shazam, and I put it on my phone. And even though it was noisy in the bar and there were people talking, I still held my phone up, and it gave me the answer I was looking for. And I said to myself, this is magic. I have a piece of magic in my hand. So
that was like 5 minutes ago when I realized I grew up with a VCR, so I got to see When Worlds Collide whenever I wanted to.
Yeah, no, I remember when we got ours, and how exciting it was I think the first movie that I rented was Death Race 2000.
Ooh,
Which was one that I had heard the legend of
for sure. For so
many years.
What's funny is that we were early adapters to VHS, VCRs, because my mom and my dad too, but my mom was a huge movie buff. And, before we made the plunge, my dad did all the research about VHS versus beta, the big decision. And he went all in on VHS, thank God. And I remember the first movie when we got this new technology, and it took my dad an hour and a half to set up because he's not very mechanically inclined. And the first thing that we watched, and it's going to sound like a joke because my mom can be a little bit of a it's got to be educational. So it was a Swedish movie called Autumn Sonata, directed by Ingmar Bergman, which when you're 8 or whatever is not what you want to see. I mean, now I recognize it as a beautiful film about, generations and mothers and daughters and talking, but we ragged my mother for years, and that was the first thing. You couldn't get a Star Wars, you had to get us Autumn Sonata. Give me a break. And it was it's a nice private joke in our family. So but it was still cool to be able to just hitting fast forward and rewind was like, whoa, look what I can do. This is amazing.
Just strolling through strolling through the aisles. We were VHS too, though. That is untypical. My family would have made more sense to have gone beta.
Yeah. Beta was better. Beta was better. Was a better piece of technology, but it was, for whatever reason, it didn't catch on. It wasn't it was too expensive, I guess. Right.
My dad always backed the wrong horses. We were Odyssey 2 instead of Atari.
I remember Odyssey 2 for sure.
Got like 30 laser discs in your library. Yeah.
That's so funny. I mean, God knows why beta. Who knows why is probably the STARLOG Archive. I can dig into there and get some VHS versus beta from the front lines of that war. Yeah. Maybe we'll do that on a future episode. We'll really try and find. I mean, there wasn't that much talk about tech, but for something like that, for home video use, for sure, that's in the STARLOG Archive. Yeah. So
but I mean, it's like social networks and things that. It isn't so much about the technology; it's about who shows up, who's there, right? That if all the stores are carrying VHS and there are more movies available, it doesn't matter if the resolution is not as good. Strangely,
it's like something like Mastodon can be a good social network, but who's on Mastodon? So what's the point? You're talking to a wall.
Well, I'm sure most any good programmer could create a new social network, but if your friends and the people you're interested in hearing from aren't on it, it's useless.
Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to. One idea as we were. I know we're probably wrapping up, so maybe this is not the time to bring up a whole new.
Bring it up.
Topic. Okay.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Talking about science fiction, right? It's always interesting to kind of probe like the definition of what is this genre, right? Like we were talking about, like what is nonfiction filmmaking? What is documentary filmmaking? It comes in 100 shapes and sizes. And like for me, in any definition is going to include things that don't count and exclude things that should. But a definition that I heard that I really liked was that, it's about technology's effect on the individual and society, right? Mm-hmm. Which, for one thing, I think excludes Star Wars, which is I would say is more like Lord of the Rings. Is a fantasy in a fantasy world where all the rules are different. In that like A Clockwork Orange is a very specific science fiction movie about this one technology that, is behavior modification. Mm-hmm. Even though there's socially that world has changed a lot, right? Mm-hmm. But there could be a more conservative version of that movie where the world looks exactly like ours, but there's this new technology to reform criminals,
right?
In a single step.
You wouldn't need the weird lobbies and the weird cars and whatnot. You can just tell the story.
Yeah. Although, gosh, I love that stuff. So I love that stuff so much.
Of course. Yeah.
But what's funny is it does include, if that's the limit of the definition, it includes movies like The Magnificent Ambersons, which is about how the automobile transforms this one family and the whole community.
Yeah.
And also sort of tying in with Clockwork Orange, and I don't think I'm the first person to have made this connection. Singing in the Rain is about technological change and what it does to the world at large.
Woody Allen's Radio Days, right? It's about how the radio changes a family.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly.
Well, that's that you've just opened up, on STARLOG Podcast, we want to talk about sci-fi. So now when we have our episode devoted to Singing in the Rain, nobody can tell us no because you just made the case.
Right?
You just
Singing in the Rain.
You set the precedent.
It could be a triple feature of Singing in the Rain, Babylon, and Valentino. Ken Russell's Valentino.
If we want to go way out there,
let's do it.
And include Star Wars on this, which plot-wise, I agree with you, Rodney, isn't. Film-wise, they absolutely are, because each time Lucasfilm comes out with a new bunch of Star Wars movies, they also pioneer new technology, whether that being chemical green screen processes.
Oh, that's behind the scenes,
sets.
Though, man. That's extra diegetic. That's not in the world of the film.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to change my mind.
Okay.
Star Wars, there is an invention in Star Wars that changes everything. The Death Star.
For sure.
Oh yeah.
A very big gun.
What happens when you could just destroy a whole planet?
Oh, man.
Although what happens is they blow up they stop the invention from ever happening.
Thank God. Yeah. So Star Wars is a movie about Luddites, really. It's an anti-science film.
Well, I mean, if you were to reconceive Star Wars, right, and make it more specifically, but there's so much other, robots and holograms and spaceships. But, if you focus on the core, what does this do to the balance of power? Destroying it kind of prevented them from answering that question. I guess the answer to the question is the Empire wins.
Well, the Empire did in fact struck back, but it took.
The Empire would blow up all the blow up all the rebel planets, and everybody would snap, and that's what would happen. It's not that much of a mystery.
That interpretation, because Star Wars it does get more serious the closer you get to the Death Star. That's where you get like Andor is essentially about all these political machinations to cover up this new technology, which is we could now obliterate a planet. As a weapon.
Yeah. That's why I like the Ewoks, man. I like it peaceful. Well, listen, Rodney, thank you so much for your time. You gave us a lot of material here. We look forward to your new projects always. Once Ghost Boy is available to stream and or see in theaters, we will make sure our readers and listeners know.
Great to talk to you.
All right. Well, that just about covers it. This was, I feel, another exciting episode of the STARLOG Podcast. Thank you so much
real,
for
Jordan.
listening.
Who knows? Nothing's real. That's what I learned from Rodney. I don't even know what's real anymore.
I know. Go watch his movies. I mean, if you haven't seen The Glitch in the Matrix, Room 237, go nuts. Drive yourself nuts. Let us know what you think about it. You can contact us at any time. You can contact me, Jordan, at starlog.com, Dave at starlog.com. You can find us on Facebook and like us and like the podcast and like everything. We're also on Blue Sky, STARLOG Media. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Mike Tritter for recording our theme song. And next week, we've got a good one next. We got a big one. A big fat movie producer, multi-zillion-dollar producer Dean Devlin. You know his films: Independence Day, Godzilla, the TV series The Ark, which is pretty damn good, which you should catch up on if you haven't seen. We're going to talk to Dean Devlin next week, and we hope that you're there to listen along on the STARLOG Podcast.